The steady beeping of the heart monitor echoed through the ICU, each beat a harsh reminder that time was running out. Olivia Prescott stood beside her father's bed, her hands clenched, her reddish-brown eyes swollen but proud. The cold white light of the hospital cast shadows across her face, highlighting the dark circles from countless sleepless nights. Edward Prescott, once the pillar of both their family and the Prescott Corporation, now lay frail and weak, his thin body entangled in IV lines. He looked at her, his cloudy eyes full of love, as if trying to memorize his daughter's face one last time. "Olivia, my daughter," Edward whispered, his voice faint, each word drawn from the last reserves of his strength. "I don't have much time left. There's something you have to promise me." Olivia leaned down, taking her father's bony hand in hers. His fingers were ice cold, but she held on tightly as if willing him to stay. "Dad, I'll do anything," she said, her voice choked, tears threatening to spill. "Just please get better." Edward shook his head, a sad smile flickering across his lips. "No, sweetheart, I need you to do this, so you'll be safe." He paused, struggling to breathe. "You must marry Damien Hawthorne." His name hit Olivia like a blade to the heart. Damien Hawthorne, CEO of Hawthorne Corp., the man she'd publicly called a suit-wearing thief at an economic forum 5 years ago. The man who stood by as she lost her reputation and career during the lawsuit against his corporation. She pulled her hand away, stepping back, fury igniting in her eyes. "Damien Hawthorne? Dad, why? He's my enemy, our enemy." Edward raised a trembling hand, motioning for her to come closer. Olivia hesitated, then sat down again, letting him take her hand once more. His grip was weak but urgent. "You don't understand, Olivia," he rasped. "I can't explain everything. But if you do this, you'll be safe. The company, the honor of our family, will be safe too." Olivia bit her lip as tears streamed down her cheeks. She remembered the aftermath of the lawsuit, accused of fabricating evidence, abandoned by colleagues, torn apart by the media. Damien hadn't acted directly, but his cold, calculated smile in the courtroom still haunted her. How could her father, the man who taught her everything about integrity, want her to marry someone like that? "Dad, I can't," she whispered, voice breaking. Edward coughed harshly, his eyes pleading. "You're the best lawyer I've ever known," he said, his voice growing weaker. "But sometimes the truth isn't what it seems. Trust me, just this once." He pulled her into a fragile embrace, his withered hand brushing through her hair like he used to when she was a child. "Promise me, my daughter." Olivia leaned into his shoulder, feeling his shallow breaths, each beep of the monitor ticking down like a countdown. Her love for her father, the man who had sacrificed everything for her, overwhelmed the anger and doubt. She squeezed his hand, tears soaking his hospital gown. "I promise, Dad," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'll marry him." Edward smiled faintly, a flicker of relief and sorrow in his eyes. "Good girl. I believe you'll uncover the truth." He paused, his gaze clouding as if seeing into some distant secret. "And Damien, he's not the enemy you think he is." Olivia froze, wanting to ask more, but Edward's eyes closed, his breath slowing, as fragile as a candle flickering in the wind. A doctor stepped in, checked the machines, and said in a solemn tone, "Miss Prescott, he needs to rest." Olivia nodded, but she didn't leave. She sat by his bed, holding his hand, heart heavy. The heart monitor slowed, then flatlined. A long, piercing beep tore through the silence, ripping her soul apart. "Dad," she whispered, her voice shattered, tears falling uncontrollably. She wrapped her arms around him in a final embrace, as if trying to hold on to the fading warmth. Olivia stood, wiping her tears. Her eyes were sharp but conflicted. Damien Hawthorne, the name that felt like a never-healing wound, was now her inescapable fate. Why did her father trust him? What secret had made him stake the family's legacy on the man she despised? The promise she made now bound her, sacred and suffocating. If this was her father's final wish, she would honor it. But she swore she would not let Damien control her. She would uncover the truth, whatever it cost. As she left the hospital room, Olivia stepped into the hallway, the cold fluorescent lights casting a solitary shadow behind her. She remembered her father's eyes full of mystery and his final words, "Uncover the truth." Her heart was a storm, grief for her father, fury at Damien, and a vague terror that the truth might shatter everything she once believed. She clenched her fists and walked into the Manhattan night, not knowing whether she was stepping into her father's dying wish or a storm that would change her life forever. You're watching Soul Stories, where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that love often arrives when we least expect it, don't forget to subscribe and be part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. Damien Hawthorne sat in the highest corner office of Hawthorne Corp's tower, the Manhattan light streaming through the glass, casting sharp angles across his face. At 32, he was the embodiment of power. A perfectly tailored black suit, piercing eyes, and a rare smile that only surfaced when he got exactly what he wanted. On his desk sat a glass of gleaming whiskey, untouched. He merely rotated it in his hand, his long fingers gliding over the rim, as if he were controlling the world in his palm. His phone buzzed softly. It was his personal attorney, Mr. Carter. "Damien, Edward Prescott's will has just been released. He's requested that you marry his daughter, Olivia Prescott, in order to secure the company shares." Damien froze, the whiskey glass pausing mid-spin. Olivia Prescott. That name, an old wound that had never healed. 5 years ago, at an economic forum, she had stood in front of hundreds and called him a suit-wearing thief for the allegations against Hawthorne Corp. She had lost the lawsuit, her reputation ruined, but her proud, defiant gaze still haunted him. Damien scoffed, his voice cold as ice. "Her? How interesting. What kind of game is Edward playing at?" Carter sighed on the other end. "It's a condition for you to retain control of the shares. If not, they'll go to Richard." Damien's grip on the glass tightened, his nails pressing into the crystal. Richard, his older brother, had always lurked in the shadows, waiting for a chance to dethrone him. "I understand," Damien replied, voice emotionless. "Arrange a meeting with her." That afternoon, Damien walked into the hospital where Edward Prescott lay dying. The hallway was sterile and cold, thick with the smell of disinfectant. Olivia stood outside her father's room, her brown hair tousled, eyes swollen but still sharp. When she saw Damien, her body stiffened, fury igniting in her gaze. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, voice shaking with restraint. Damien tilted his head slightly, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "Hello, Miss Prescott. I came to accept your father's proposal." Olivia stepped forward, pointing a finger at him. "Don't call it a proposal. This is a trap, and I know you're plotting something." Damien stepped closer, locking eyes with her. "You think I want this?" he said, voice low and blade sharp. "I don't need love. I need his shares, and you need to fulfill the will. 1 year of marriage, no strings, no intimacy, no interference." He extended his hand, as if sealing a business contract. Olivia looked down at his hand, the long fingers adorned only by a simple silver ring, then back up at him, eyes defiant. "You think I'll agree that easily, Hawthorne?" Damien smiled, but it wasn't warm. "You don't have a choice, Prescott. Neither do I." He stepped in closer, so near she could catch the subtle scent of sandalwood on his cologne. Olivia backed away, but not fast enough. His hand brushed against hers as he adjusted his suit jacket, a brief touch that startled them both. She pulled away like she'd been burned. "Don't touch me," she said, voice icy but slightly unsteady. Damien raised an eyebrow, something flickering in his gaze. Curiosity or mockery? "Relax, I didn't intend to," he replied, though his eyes lingered on her longer than necessary. They stood there just a few steps apart, the air between them charged like a silent battlefield. Olivia turned away, heading back into her father's room, but Damien called after her. "You have 1 week to prepare. Don't waste my time." He walked away, footsteps echoing down the corridor. Inside his car, Damien gripped the steering wheel tightly. Memories of the forum 5 years ago rushed back. Olivia on the stage, eyes blazing with defiance, accusing him in front of the world. He hadn't responded, not because she was wrong, but because he'd wanted to see how far she'd go. Now here she was again, not as an adversary, but as a piece of fate he couldn't avoid. Damien stared out the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. Why had Edward Prescott chosen him, someone his daughter loathed? There was something the old man hadn't told them, and Damien swore he'd find out, no matter what it cost, even if it meant facing Olivia Prescott, the storm he both despised and, inexplicably, was drawn to. The law office on the 40th floor of a Manhattan high-rise was suffocatingly quiet, broken only by the rustle of paperwork and the occasional sigh of Attorney Carter. No flowers, no music, not even a cake. The wedding of Olivia Prescott and Damien Hawthorne was so stripped down it was nearly invisible. Olivia stood before the old oak desk, clad in a form-fitting black dress that looked more appropriate for a funeral than a wedding. Her brown eyes glinted with pride, but her clenched fists betrayed the pain she hid beneath the surface. Across from her stood Damien Hawthorne, in a perfectly tailored ash-gray suit, his face as emotionless as stone, his eyes unreadable. Carter, glasses slipping down his nose, read the vows in a stiff, awkward voice. Damien Hawthorne, do you take Olivia Prescott as your wife, under all circumstances, until this contract expires? Damien raised an eyebrow, his eyes briefly flicking to Olivia, sharp as a blade. I do, he said flatly, voice deep and dry, as if closing a multi-million-dollar deal. Olivia bit her lip, nails digging into her palm as she fought back anger. I do, she replied, voice low and trembling, each word slicing through her pride. She recalled the promise she'd made beside her father's hospital bed, the pleading look in Edward Prescott's eyes. You'll be safe. But standing in front of Damien, the same man she had once called a suit-wearing thief 5 years ago, she felt nothing but emptiness. Carter slid the thick stack of papers toward them. The marriage contract, heavy with cold, clinical clauses. No emotional ties, no physical intimacy, no interference in each other's lives. Sign here, he murmured, as if even he didn't want to witness this moment. Damien picked up the pen and signed, bold and decisive. He handed it to Olivia, his fingers brushing hers by accident. A jolt shot through her, and she flinched, fury flashing in her eyes. Careful, Hawthorne, she snapped, her voice cold as ice, but her gaze lingered on his hand a second too long. Damien watched her, the corner of his mouth lifting into a faint, mocking smile. Sign it, Prescott. Don't waste my time. Olivia gripped the pen tightly, signing her name in sharp, elegant strokes that still trembled. Their eyes met, a moment taut with unspoken tension, like two fighters sizing each other up in a ring. But beneath that, something flickered, a challenge, a warning, a test of will. Carter cleared his throat, breaking the silence. It's done. Congratulations to you both, he said softly, though no one responded. Damien stood, adjusted his suit, eyes still cool. You'll move into the penthouse tonight. We need to legitimize this for the press. Olivia nodded without a word, her heart sinking like lead. They left the office through separate doors, as if sharing the same space for even one more second was too much to bear. In the car, Olivia sat alone, her eyes fixed on the passing skyline. Towering buildings blurred by the window as she touched her bare finger, where a wedding ring should have been. But even the ring was fake, just a cheap metal band meant to serve as a prop. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Not for Damien, but for the grief of losing her father and the hollow weight of the promise she was trying to keep. She remembered Edward's final words. Damien isn't the enemy you think he is. But if he wasn't her enemy, what was he? The driver, an older man, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. You all right, Miss Prescott? He asked gently. Olivia quickly wiped her tears, forcing a brittle smile. I'm fine, she said, though her voice cracked. She clenched her hands in her lap, vowing Damien Hawthorne would never control her. This is just a contract, she reminded herself. But deep down, fear stirred, not of him, but of the truth her father had hinted at, a truth she wasn't ready to face. When the car pulled up in front of her apartment, Olivia stepped out. The streetlights cast her silhouette onto the pavement, alone, composed, but quietly unraveling. Damien Hawthorne's penthouse, perched atop a Manhattan skyscraper, was the embodiment of luxury and control. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered a dazzling view of the city, but the atmosphere inside was as cold as its owner's soul. Olivia Prescott stepped inside, dragging a small suitcase and a cat carrier with Luna, the calico she'd rescued during the worst days of her life. Her simple knit dress looked oddly out of place amidst the sleek, modern interiors, like an outsider entering enemy territory. Damien stood by the door, still impeccably dressed in his ash-gray suit, his gaze sharp and assessing. "You're 10 minutes late," he said, voice low but edged with clear irritation. Olivia shrugged and set the cat carrier down. "Traffic in Manhattan doesn't exactly take orders from you, Hawthorne." As her eyes scanned the apartment, she immediately noticed the oddities: a fridge with a digital lock, a bathroom with facial recognition, and surveillance cameras glinting discreetly in the corners. "Is this a home or a high-security prison?" she asked, voice laced with sarcasm. Damien stepped closer, only a few feet separating them now. "This is my home," he replied, eyes locked on hers. "And if you want to stay, you follow my rules." Tension sparked as Olivia wandered into the penthouse library, his sanctuary. Mahogany shelves held rare legal volumes, and a glossy ebony desk stood at the center like a throne. She reached for a law book, but Damien was there in an instant, gripping her wrist. His touch was firm, not painful, but it startled her. "Don't touch my things," he murmured, his voice low, almost a warning. The contact sent a warm jolt through Olivia, making her pulse skip. She pulled her hand back quickly, eyes narrowed. "Afraid I'll find out one of your secrets, Hawthorne?" Damien's lips curled into a faint smirk, but his eyes lingered on her longer than necessary, as if calculating something far beyond the moment. With a defiant gleam in her eye, Olivia unlatched the carrier. Luna sauntered out lazily, heading straight for Damien's desk, where she curled up on his laptop, her tail flicking across the keyboard. Olivia grinned mischievously. "Looks like Luna's more into your stuff than I am." Damien stared at the cat, a frown creasing his brow. Then unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth twitched in the faintest of smiles. "Your trouble," he said, his voice lighter now, almost amused. He moved to lift the cat, but Olivia stepped forward, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "Leave her," she said softly but firmly. "She's the only friend I have here." For a moment they stood shoulder to shoulder. Olivia caught the scent of his cologne, sandalwood, clean and commanding, and it unnerved her. She stepped back quickly, masking the sudden flush in her cheeks. Damien looked at her, gaze unreadable. "You can keep the cat," he said, "but don't expect me to go easy on you." Olivia gave a small, dry smile. "I don't expect anything from you, except for this contract to run its course." That night, Olivia sat curled on the couch, Luna in her lap, her fingers running through the cat's soft fur. Her heart was heavy. She missed her father, missed the safety of his presence. She couldn't help but wonder why he'd bound her to a man like Damien. Her eyes drifted toward the library where Damien sat working, the glow of his laptop reflecting off his face. He glanced up and met her gaze. For one suspended second, the air between them seemed to pulse. Then Olivia looked away, holding Luna closer, as if the cat were her only anchor in this foreign world. Later, Damien paused outside her bedroom door. His hand rested lightly on the frame, like he wanted to say something. But all he said was, "Get some sleep, Prescott. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Olivia nodded silently, her thoughts a storm. She knew she was stepping into something dangerous, not just with Damien, but with her own heart. Damien Hawthorne's penthouse, with its glass walls overlooking Manhattan, had become a silent battlefield. For Olivia Prescott and Damien, now husband and wife in name only, cohabitation began not with warmth, but with an icy war of wills. Every minor gesture was a calculated strike, every glance a challenge. Olivia, her brown hair tied up and clad in a simple white blouse, stepped into the kitchen only to find the fridge locked with a digital code. She tapped in random numbers. The screen flashed red. "Perfect," she muttered sarcastically. "My enemy locks up the food." Damien appeared in the doorway, dressed in a tailored black suit, eyes cold yet lips curved slightly, as if enjoying the game. "You wouldn't need a code if you knew how to ask," he said, voice low as he stepped forward and unlocked the fridge with a quick facial scan. Olivia crossed her arms, eyes sharp. "Ask you. I'd rather starve." Damien shrugged, grabbed a bottle of water, and in handing it to her, his fingers brushed against hers. The unexpected contact made Olivia flinch, her heart stuttering. She turned away to mask the reaction, but Damien's gaze lingered, as if he'd noticed more than she intended. The war continued. Olivia left her coffee cup on Damien's prized ebony desk, leaving behind a damp ring on the polished wood. He retaliated by cutting the Wi-Fi, blocking her from sending a crucial work email. She countered by letting Luna, the calico cat, accidentally sprawl across his favorite leather chair, leaving trails of fur behind. Damien eyed the cat, his brow twitching in disapproval, but a fleeting, unintentional smile broke through. "Did you train that thing just to drive me insane?" he asked, voice tinged with amusement. Olivia gave him a cheeky smile. "Luna's self-taught. She has better taste than you, clearly." That night, dinner became the peak of their Cold War. They sat across from each other at the long dining table, chandelier light sharpening the tension between them. Olivia stirred her now lukewarm soup, her voice icy. "I used to think you were the worst nightmare of my life. Now, I know I was right." Damien set his utensils down with precision, eyes locked on hers. "You're the worst contract I've ever signed," he replied, voice like a blade. "And I've negotiated with the Italian mafia." Olivia laughed, not from amusement, but because the bitterness of his words struck a nerve too real to ignore. They stood up at the same time, unintentionally close as they cleared the dishes. Damien's shoulder brushed hers. The heat of his body made her freeze. She looked up, eyes meeting his just inches away. "Don't get so close," she whispered, voice slightly trembling. But she didn't move. Damien tilted his head, gaze unreadable. "Are you afraid of me or of yourself, Prescott?" Olivia clenched her fists, inner turmoil rising. She wanted to push him away, but his eyes, no longer cold, were searching, curious. She turned abruptly, stepping out onto the balcony, needing the cool night air to calm her racing heart. Outside, she hugged herself, staring out over the glittering city. Luna came quietly, rubbing against her leg. Olivia knelt down, stroking the cat's soft fur, her chest tight. Luna had been a gift from her father during the days she lost everything after filing the lawsuit against Hawthorne Corp. She remembered Edward's enigmatic eyes when he asked her to marry Damien. "He's not the enemy you think," her father had said. But if Damien wasn't the enemy, what was he? She looked through the glass, saw Damien standing at the window, his gaze fixed on her, saying nothing. And yet something in the silence pulled at her, a tension neither of them fully understood. Damien stepped onto the balcony, stopping a few paces away. "You should get some sleep," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Tomorrow the press will want pictures of the happy couple." Olivia nodded, clutching Luna closer. "I don't need your reminders," she replied, though the sharp edge was gone from her tone. As Damien turned, his hand brushed hers, a ghost of a touch, light as wind, yet enough to send a shiver up her spine. She watched him walk away, heart pounding, uncertain if the war was against him or the feelings he stirred. That night in a foreign room, Olivia lay down with Luna curled at her side. But sleep never came, only the memory of Damien's eyes, deep and unreadable, haunting her in the dark. The library in Damien Hawthorne's penthouse glowed softly under the amber light of an antique desk lamp. The scent of old books mingled with the room's cool, sterile air. Olivia Prescott sat curled in a leather chair, cradling an aged law book, one of the few belongings of her late father, Edward Prescott, sent along with other personal effects after the charade of a wedding. The worn leather and the yellowed pages brought her back to nights by the fireplace, where Edward's warm voice made the world feel safe. But he was gone now, leaving her behind with one last painful promise: to marry Damien, the man she once called the thief in a suit, the man she swore never to forgive. She turned a page, A folded slip of paper fluttered to the floor. Her breath caught as her father's shaky handwriting appeared beneath the lamplight. Her heart pounded. He was speaking to her from beyond. She unfolded the note, eyes scanning the lines. "My daughter, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say everything. Don't hate Damien too quickly. Listen to your heart, just once." Her fingers trembled as they traced the name Damien. Why had her father, who had taught her everything about integrity, placed his trust in a man with a blade for a stare and a smile that came with thorns? The silence shattered with the sound of footsteps. Damien appeared in the doorway, 2 buttons undone on his white shirt, a glass of amber whiskey in hand. "What are you doing in my library?" he asked, voice low, eyes flicking to the book and the letter in her hands. Olivia quickly folded the paper, too late to hide it. Her heartbeat spiked. "I don't need your permission," she snapped, voice sharp but unsteady, standing to leave. But Damien moved like wind, blocking her path in a heartbeat. "What is that?" he asked, gaze locked on the letter as though it held a truth he desperately needed. She stepped back until her spine met the bookshelf. Trapped. Damien stood just inches away, his body radiating heat, the faint scent of sandalwood cologne clouding her thoughts. "Stay out of my business, Hawthorne," she said, defiant but breathless. Her pulse thundered. Damien reached out, fingertips brushing hers in an attempt to take the letter. The touch sparked something between them, something they both felt. Both froze, their eyes locked. "You think I'm interfering?" he murmured, voice husky. "But if it's about Edward, I have a right to know." Olivia clutched the letter tighter, her voice cracked. "You have no rights where my father is concerned." Tears welled, but she turned away before they could fall. Damien didn't move, standing so close she could see the faint shadows beneath his eyes, the exhaustion etched in his features. "What did he say about me?" he asked, softer now, almost pleading, a crack in his controlled facade. She stared at him, stunned. For the first time, Damien Hawthorne wasn't impenetrable. "He told me to trust you," she whispered. "But I can't." Damien went still, his hand dropping, but his eyes remained fixed on her, burning with things unsaid. Olivia stepped past him, the letter still clenched in her hand. "Prescott," he called, voice low but urgent. "If you want the truth, don't shut me out." She paused, turning back. "The truth?" she said bitterly. "From someone who locks the fridge just to control me?" A faint smirk tugged at Damien's lips, his tone teasing despite the tension. "Maybe I was saving you from my cold soup." Olivia let out a startled laugh, quick, involuntary. She turned away again, hiding the smile as her emotions tangled in knots. Back in her room, Luna, the calico cat, curled up on the bed. Olivia sat beside her, stroking the soft fur, the letter still clutched in her hand. She read it again, tears glistening in her eyes. What had her father seen in Damien that she couldn't? She remembered Edward's gaze, mysterious, unwavering, and the promise she'd made at his bedside. But now with Damien's lingering touch and eyes that made her heart stutter, Olivia wondered if she was really fighting him, or the way he was beginning to make her feel. Outside her door, Damien stood quietly, looking in through the narrow gap, the sound of her silence louder than anything. Inside him, questions stirred, about Edward, about Olivia, and about a strange growing fire he couldn't quite name, a fire he didn't want to extinguish. The boardroom of Hawthorne Corp shimmered with the sterile glow of LED lights. The bitter scent of black coffee clung to the tense air, mingling with the weight of unspoken judgments. Olivia Prescott sat beside Damien Hawthorne, her hands resting on the dark ebony table, fingertips digging lightly into her palms to mask the unease. She wore a fitted black suit, her brown hair pulled into a sharp ponytail, gaze proud but unmistakably out of place amid the sea of tailored power suits. Damien, dressed in a deep navy suit, sat upright and composed, his eyes sharp and assessing, like a king guarding his throne. A dry cough broke the silence. Harold Vance, the chairman, cleared his throat. "Mr. Hawthorne," he began, his voice clipped. "Ms. Prescott's presence today is causing a stir. Some shareholders are concerned about the legitimacy of this marriage." Evelyn Carter, a major stakeholder, rose from her seat, her gaze sharp as a scalpel. Why should we trust a CEO who just married the woman who once sued this company? What is this? Some strategy or just another stunt? Olivia stiffened. Memories from 5 years ago surged forward. Headlines, whispers behind her back, the sting of betrayal, and the humiliation of losing everything. She parted her lips to speak, but Damien's hand slid beneath the table, resting on hers. Warm, steady, commanding. The touch startled her. Her eyes flicked to his, heartbeat stuttering. "Let me," he murmured, voice low and private. Then he stood, his presence filling the room with quiet authority. His gaze swept over the board, icy, unflinching. "I married Olivia because she's brave enough to tell the truth," he said, voice resonant and calm. "I don't trust those who only know how to stay quiet when money's at stake. If you question her, question me, because I chose her." The room stilled. Only Evelyn Carter's uneven breathing could be heard. Olivia stared at Damien. For the first time, her gaze held not anger, but surprise. He'd defended her, in front of the very people who could destroy him. She still felt the imprint of his hand on hers, a strange heat lingering. "And how do you explain the lawsuit 5 years ago?" Carter snapped, voice biting. Damien offered a faint smile, his eyes glittering. "She lost because she lacked evidence, not because she lied. Maybe you should ask who buried that evidence." Olivia's fingers curled. "He knows." Her mind raced, but his unreadable gaze held her back from asking. They sat down again, shoulders brushing. She caught the scent of his sandalwood cologne, earthy, compelling, maddening. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice slightly shaky. Damien tilted his head, a flicker of mischief in his eyes. "Saving you from the wolves, unless you preferred to fight alone." A laugh escaped her lips, soft and unplanned. She turned away quickly, masking the smile. "I don't need saving," she replied, though the edge in her tone was gone. The meeting continued, but Olivia no longer heard the words. Her mind returned to her father's letter, his trembling handwriting. "Don't hate Damien too quickly." "What did you see in him, Dad?" she wondered. She glanced sideways. Damien was listening to Vance speak, but his lips curved slightly, as if aware of her stare. "Stop looking at me like that, Prescott," he murmured, not turning. "You'll make me think you're grateful." She scoffed lightly, though her heart betrayed her with its quickened pace. "Keep dreaming, Hawthorne," she shot back, a teasing lilt in her voice. When the meeting adjourned, Damien stood and adjusted his suit jacket, his hand grazing her shoulder. The contact was fleeting, but it made her pause. They exited together, the eyes of the board still glued to their backs. In the hallway, Olivia halted. She turned to face him. "Why did you do it?" she asked quietly, her tone serious. Damien met her eyes, his own steady and dark. "Because I don't like losing, and you're part of this battle now." She shook her head, but for the first time she didn't see him as the enemy. As she walked away, her mind was a tangle of confusion, and yet beneath it all, a flicker of warmth stirred in her chest, something soft, unfamiliar. As if, somewhere, her father was smiling. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. The hotel room in downtown Manhattan was bathed in a soft amber glow from the chandelier above. The scent of polished wood mingled with painful memories. Olivia Prescott sat curled up in an armchair, clutching a cup of cold coffee, her gaze distant as she stared out the window. The skyscrapers glittering in the distance seemed to mock her. 5 years ago, in this very room, she had prepared her lawsuit against Hawthorne Corp., accusing them of labor ethics violations. She had believed she would win, that truth would be on her side, but she lost her reputation, her career, and was branded as someone who fabricated evidence. Those memories were scars, and today she had returned, not to fight, but to search for answers. Olivia flipped through an old file, her handwritten notes from the case. She remembered the sleepless nights, her father Edward's encouraging eyes as he told her, "You're doing the right thing, Olivia." But after the loss, she discovered that several key documents had vanished, as if someone had deliberately set her up. She used to believe Damien Hawthorne was behind it all, with that cold smile he wore in the courtroom. But after reading her father's letter, "Don't be too quick to hate Damien," and seeing him defend her at the shareholder meeting, her doubts began. If not Damien, then who? A knock at the door startled her. She rose, opened it, and froze. Damien stood there, dressed in a fitted black suit, his deep-set eyes scanning her. "What are you doing here, Prescott?" he asked, voice low, tinged with suspicion. Olivia folded her arms, gaze defiant. "I could ask you the same. How did you know I was here?" Damien stepped inside without invitation, closing the space between them. "My attorney saw your name on the reservation," he replied, glancing at the open file on the table. "Digging up the past or planning to take me down again?" Olivia's grip tightened. Her voice turned icy. "Not everything revolves around you, Hawthorne. I'm looking for the truth about the lawsuit." Damien tilted his head, his eyes sharp as blades. "The truth?" he echoed sarcastically. "You lost because you were overconfident, Prescott. Or do you think I framed you?" Olivia stepped forward, just inches from him, her eyes blazing. "I used to think so," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But now I'm not sure. Someone stole my documents, and I'm going to find out who." The air was heavy, like the stillness before a storm. Damien stood so close Olivia could feel his body heat, the scent of his sandalwood cologne enveloping her. "You suspect me," he said quietly, eyes locked on hers. "But if I wanted to destroy you, I wouldn't have waited this long." Olivia backed up, but her shoulder brushed against his arm as he adjusted his jacket. The accidental touch made them both pause, their eyes meeting, tense but charged with something unspoken. "Don't touch me," she whispered, voice shaky, but she didn't step away. Damien gave a faint smile, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "Relax, Prescott. I'm not here to make things messier. Though maybe I should, just to stop you from digging deeper." Olivia laughed unexpectedly, the tension breaking for a moment. "You think you're funny?" she asked, her tone lighter. Damien shrugged, gaze still fixed on her. "I think you need to laugh more." The simple words struck something deep in her, something lonely. She turned away, hugging herself, eyes drifting back to the file. "Why can't you let this go?" Damien asked, his voice softer now, almost sincere. Olivia looked at him, sadness clouding her eyes. "Because it's what my father believed in," she said, her voice cracking, "and I already let him down once. I won't do it again." Damien was silent, his eyes flickering with something. Was it empathy or regret? He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to rest lightly on her shoulder, a gesture of comfort, but stopped when she tensed. "You're not alone in this," he said quietly. "But if you want the truth, be careful. It may not be what you think." Olivia stared at him, conflicted. His words, that brief touch, the depth in his eyes. It all made her wonder if her father had been right about him. She thought of Luna, the calico cat waiting for her in the penthouse, and the loneliness crept back in. "I'm always careful," she said firmly, but her gaze lingered on him longer than it should have. Damien nodded and turned to leave, but his eyes haunted her. When the door closed behind him, Olivia sat down, brushing her fingers over the file, vowing to uncover the truth. No matter where it led, even if her heart was starting to falter for the man she once called her enemy. Damien Hawthorne's penthouse living room was soaked in golden chandelier light, yet the atmosphere hung heavy, like the edge of a storm. Olivia Prescott stood by the window, staring at the glittering Manhattan skyline, her hand gripping a glass of red wine. She wore a simple gray sweater, but her posture betrayed the unease beneath her pride. Damien sat on the leather armchair opposite, his white shirt slightly unbuttoned, eyes dark and watchful. A glass of whiskey glimmered in his hand, untouched, slowly swirling as if he were holding back something. "What did you find at the hotel yesterday?" Damien asked, breaking the silence with a deep voice. Olivia turned to him, her eyes sparking with fury. "That's none of your business," she snapped, her voice shaking just slightly. "Or are you afraid I'll dig up something that points to you?" Damien stood, closing the distance between them. "You still think I was behind your case?" he asked, low and steady. "Don't you get tired of blaming me, Prescott?" Olivia stepped closer, only inches away, refusing to back down. I am tired, she admitted, her voice raw. But I'm tired of not knowing the truth. Who stole my documents? Who took everything from me? Damien's grip tightened around the glass, his eyes flashing. Anger or pain? You think I had to do that to beat you? He said, voice cutting. You lost because you were too sure of yourself, not because of me. The words struck like a blade. Olivia recoiled, her eyes brimming with tears. She remembered the days after the lawsuit, when her father Edward held her and whispered, "You did the right thing." She remembered his letter. Don't be too quick to hate Damien. She turned away, trying to hide her tears. But Damien stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Prescott, he said, his voice gentler now. I'm not your enemy. The touch froze her. The warmth of his hand through her sweater made her heart race. She pushed him away, but their eyes met. Not hostile now, but searching, wanting to understand. Olivia moved to the bar, grabbed the whiskey bottle, and poured him another drink. Her fingers brushed his as she handed him the glass, sending a jolt through both of them. What are you doing? Damien asked, his deep voice tinged with amusement. Olivia smirked. I'm not trying to poison you, if that's what you're thinking. It lightened the mood. Damien let out a rare laugh, deep, warm, unexpected. I used to think you were an opportunist, he said softly, but tonight I see something else. Olivia looked at him, heart tangled in confusion. She didn't respond, just quietly poured herself another drink, her eyes lingering on him again. They sat down, a small table between them, but the energy had shifted. Why did my father trust you? Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper, afraid to shatter the fragile moment. Damien stared into his glass, his gaze distant. Edward taught me to play chess when I was a boy, he said hoarsely. He told me I could win, if I protected what mattered, but I failed. Olivia froze. It was the first time she'd seen a glimpse of his past. She wanted to ask more, but the pain in his eyes held her back. I don't know who set you up, Damien continued, his voice sharpening again, but if you want to find out, I'll help you. Olivia looked at him, suspicion clouding her expression. Why would you help me? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Damien leaned in, close enough that she could smell the sandalwood on him. Because I'm tired of you hating me, he said sincerely. Olivia laughed softly, surprised. You think I'll stop hating you just because of that? She teased. Damien gave a dry smile. I'm not a dreamer, Prescott, but I like a challenge. Olivia stood and stepped out onto the balcony. Luna, her calico cat, rubbed against her leg. She bent to pet Luna, her heart heavy. Damien stood in the doorway, watching her silhouette, his hand tightening around the glass. Get some sleep, Prescott, he said. Olivia nodded, not turning around, but his gaze stayed with her. That night, as she lay in bed with Luna curled up beside her, she wondered, was she starting to believe in him, or just losing herself in the eyes of the man who once haunted her dreams? The Charity Gala Hall in Manhattan shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers. The clinking of wine glasses blended with the chatter of high society. Olivia Prescott stood beside Damien Hawthorne, a strained smile on her lips and caution glinting in her brown eyes. Her wine-red evening gown clung to her form, exuding pride. But the discomfort didn't come from the fabric. It came from Damien's hand resting lightly on her waist, a staged gesture for the cameras. Smile more naturally, he murmured, his warm breath brushing her ear, making her shiver. They're watching. Olivia tilted her head slightly, her voice soft but sharp. I'm trying, but you're standing too close. I can't breathe. Damien gave a picture-perfect smile, but his eyes held a flicker of curiosity, as if searching for something. Suddenly, a wave of exhaustion hit her. Olivia faltered, gripping his arm, her nails pressing into his suit. You okay? Damien asked quietly, a trace of concern slipping into his voice. Just a little tired, she replied, brushing her hair back to mask the unease. Damien frowned slightly, eyes scanning her, but he said nothing more. They walked through the crowd hand in hand, the picture of a perfect couple. But under the lights, Olivia could feel the weight of his gaze. A reporter raised a microphone. Mr. Hawthorne, is your marriage a strategic move to solidify your shares? Damien pulled Olivia closer, his hand tightening at her waist, protective yet possessive. We're a team, he said firmly. She's the only one who's ever dared challenge me, and I respect that. Olivia glanced at him, her heart racing. Was that line rehearsed or real? The warmth of his touch seeped through her dress, almost making her forget it was all an act. On the dance floor, Damien guided her through slow waltz steps, his hand firm on her back, his body heat seeping through the thin fabric. Olivia looked up, her face inches from his, catching the scent of sandalwood, intense and haunting. How long are we going to keep pretending? She whispered, her gaze defiant. Damien tilted his head, his lips nearly brushing her ear. Until I know why your father chose me and no one else. Olivia froze. The words sliced through her like a blade, opening a door to something hidden. She tightened her grip on his hand, not for the cameras but for something steadier in the emotional storm. As the music ended, Damien still held her hand, his thumb brushing lightly across the back, a small gesture that startled her. Don't get used to this, she said coldly, though her voice trembled. Damien smiled faintly, eyes glinting. I make no promises, Prescott. They stepped off the floor as camera flashes lit up around them, but Olivia felt a spark, small, dangerous, and terrifyingly real. At the bar, Damien handed her a glass of wine, their fingers brushing as he passed it. You look like you want to run, he teased. Olivia took a sip, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. If I did, would you chase me? Damien leaned closer, his gaze intense. Maybe, just to see how far you get. She laughed and the tension between them eased, but his eyes held her there, an unspoken dare lingering in the air. She stepped out onto the balcony, needing air to calm her racing heart. She thought of her father's letter. Don't be too quick to hate Damien. What had he seen in this man? Damien appeared beside her, resting a hand on the railing, a step away. What are you thinking? He asked, voice low. Olivia looked at him, doubt in her eyes. I think my father trusted you for a reason I haven't seen yet. Damien went still, a flicker of pain in his eyes. Maybe he saw something I forgot, he murmured. They stood in silence, the city lights casting a glow on their faces. Damien raised a hand as if to touch her shoulder, but stopped. Don't make me regret trusting you, he said, his eyes sincere. Olivia nodded, conflicted. Same to you, Hawthorne, she replied softly. As he walked away, his gaze lingered, haunting her. Olivia clutched her glass, wondering if she was still playing her role or starting to feel something real. Something her father, from somewhere, may have already known. The suburban cemetery outside Manhattan lay beneath a dusky sunset, the rows of headstones standing quietly under ancient oak trees. Olivia Prescott stood at a distance, her gray knit coat hugging her frame, her eyes somber as she watched Damien Hawthorne kneeling by a modest grave. The stone read Margaret Hawthorne, his mother, who passed over 2 decades ago. Olivia hadn't planned to come. She'd only seen Damien leave the penthouse with a bouquet of white flowers, his eyes pensive, nothing like his usual cold demeanor. Curiosity and something she couldn't quite name had led her to follow. Damien, dressed simply in a black suit, placed the bouquet down and brushed the headstone gently, as if searching for a memory long lost. Olivia stood behind an oak, not wanting to intrude, but her heart twisted. Was this pain what her father had seen in him? Damien looked up and spotted her, surprised at first, then wary. You followed me? He asked, voice low but lacking its usual sharpness. Olivia stepped out, the sunset catching her brown hair. I didn't follow you, she said gently. I just wanted to see where you were going. Damien stood, brushing his hands against his jacket, his gaze heavy. You didn't need to know, he replied, but his voice trembled slightly, revealing a crack in his armor. Olivia moved closer, stopping a few steps away. Her eyes softened with empathy. Who is she? She asked, glancing at the headstone. Damien looked down. My mother, he said hoarsely. She left when I was 7. No explanation. Never came back. Olivia froze, her heart aching. She remembered losing her father, how that pain had left a void that never fully closed. "I'm sorry," she whispered sincerely. Damien looked at her, surprised, as if he hadn't expected kindness. "Don't be," he said quietly. "I learned not to trust anyone after that. The one person who loved me walked away without a word." The words cut deep, not just into him, but into her. She stepped forward, her hand gently brushing his, her fingers closing around his. "Not everyone leaves," she said, her gaze locked on his. The touch startled them both. The warmth of her skin seeped into his. Damien looked down at their hands, his eyes softening, but he didn't pull away. "You don't know me, Prescott," he said, voice low, but his usual defenses were gone. Olivia gave a small, sad smile, her eyes reflecting her own pain. "Maybe not," she said, "but I know what pain feels like." They stood there hand in hand, the sunset surrounding them like time had frozen. Olivia let go and stepped back, but their eyes stayed connected. "Why did you tell me?" she asked softly. Damien tilted his head, a hint of teasing in his eyes to lighten the moment. "Maybe because you're too stubborn for me to stay silent," he said, lips curving slightly. Olivia laughed unexpectedly, the tension melting away. "You better be careful, Hawthorne," she teased. "I could use this against you." Damien gave her a rare, real smile. "I'd like to see you try." They left the cemetery walking side by side, not too close but not far apart either. Olivia felt something shift, not full trust, but a flicker of connection. She thought of her father and wondered if he had known about Damien's wounds. "What did my father say to you?" she asked quietly. Damien paused, his gaze distant. "He said I could be better if I allowed myself to feel," he replied. "But I've never been good at that." Olivia looked at him, heart tangled. "Maybe he was right," she said, her eyes gentle. When they got into the car, Damien sat beside her, his arm brushing her shoulder as he buckled his seatbelt. The light touch felt like a breeze, but it made Olivia's heart race. Damien smiled faintly, his eyes deep and unreadable. Olivia turned away, looking out the window, but his gaze lingered. She thought of Luna, the calico cat waiting in the penthouse, and the loneliness eased just a little. That night, as she lay down, Olivia wondered if she was finally starting to understand Damien, or if she was simply getting lost in the eyes of the man who used to be her enemy. Damien Hawthorne's penthouse lay cloaked in darkness, the only light seeping from the library, a dim golden glow mingling with the stillness of the night. Damien sat in a leather chair, a glass of whiskey glinting in his hand, his weary eyes fixed on the shimmering Manhattan skyline. The phone buzzed, shattering the silence. A distorted voice echoed through the speaker. "Don't let her control you. She's a spy for Prescott." Damien's grip tightened on the glass, his gaze turning icy. Olivia Prescott, proud, sharp-eyed, with that rare, defiant smile. Was she really playing a much bigger game than he'd imagined? In the library, Olivia carefully flipped through the ebony bookshelves, searching for clues from the lawsuit 5 years ago. Dressed in a gray sweater, her hair pulled up, her eyes focused. Her father Edward's letter still haunted her. "Don't be too quick to hate Damien." But if Damien didn't frame her, then who did? She paused at a leather-bound notebook, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for it. Footsteps startled her. Damien stood in the doorway, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his gaze sharp as a blade. "What are you doing in here, Prescott?" he asked, voice low, laced with suspicion. Olivia quickly closed the notebook, panic flickering in her eyes. "I was just browsing," she replied, voice shaky but recovering fast. Damien stepped forward, closing the gap between them until he was just inches away. "Don't lie," he said, eyes locked onto hers. "Who sent you? Your father? Or someone else?" Olivia backed up until her spine hit the shelf, nowhere to run. "You think I'm a spy?" she snapped, her eyes flaring with anger. "I'm here for my father, not for you." Damien reached out, his fingers brushing hers as he took the notebook. The contact sparked a jolt between them. Their eyes locked, suspicion simmering, but an undeniable pull underneath. "You're digging into my past," he said quietly. "But did you ever think I might be searching for answers too?" Olivia's hands clenched, her heartbeat racing. What answers? She asked, voice trembling. Damien tilted his head, eyes dark and unreadable. Why Edward chose me to marry you. The words hit like a blade. Olivia fell silent. She remembered her father's gaze, mysterious, resolute, and the promise she'd made at his bedside. What do you know about my father? She asked, voice cracking. Damien stepped back, something wounded flashing through his eyes. He was the only person who believed in me, he said thickly, when I didn't even believe in myself. Olivia froze, seeing a side of him that wasn't cold, but scarred. She stepped forward, her fingers gently wrapping around his. If you're telling the truth, she whispered, then help me find it. The touch charged the air between them. The warmth of her hands seeped into his skin. Damien looked down at their hands, his gaze softening, but he didn't pull away. You trust me enough to ask that? He asked, voice teasing, diffusing the tension. Olivia let out a breathless laugh. Don't flatter yourself, Hawthorne, she replied lightly. I'm just out of options. Damien smiled, a rare, genuine one. I like that reason. They left the library, eyes lingering. Back in her room, Olivia was greeted by Luna, her calico cat rubbing against her leg. She crouched to pet her, heart in a storm. What did Damien really know about her father? And why had that anonymous call targeted her? She glanced toward the door, imagining Damien standing there. His gaze still haunted her. Meanwhile, in his own room, Damien clutched his phone, his mind racing. If she's a spy, he muttered, she's the best I've ever met. That night, neither of them slept. Each was lost in their own thoughts. But an invisible thread had pulled them just a little closer. The storage room in Edward Prescott's old house on the outskirts of Manhattan was bathed in a dusty light, the scent of old paper blending with the stillness of memory. Olivia Prescott knelt beside a wooden chest, her fingers brushing over yellowed files, her heart heavy. She had come searching for clues about the lawsuit from 5 years ago, but every sheet of paper, every faded word, brought back her father, the man who left her behind with one cryptic wish, to marry Damien Hawthorne, the man she once called her enemy. Edward's trusting gaze still haunted her, urging her to dig deeper. She opened an old photo album, and a photograph slipped out, its edges frayed and torn. Olivia picked it up, heart pounding. Edward, smiling warmly, stood beside a young Damien, around 10, both beaming over a chessboard. On the back, in her father's handwriting, Damien, my student, 1985. Olivia froze, her fingers trembling against the photograph. Damien was once her father's student? The image, so intimate, almost father and son, clashed with everything she thought she knew. A folded letter tucked inside the album caught her eye. She opened it and read her father's shaky handwriting. Damien was once my student in business ethics, but someone twisted that. Daughter, find the truth. Olivia clutched the letter, mind spinning. If Damien wasn't behind the lawsuit, then who had orchestrated it all? She recalled his eyes at the cemetery, wounded, human, and wondered if she'd misjudged him all along. A creaking door jolted her. Damien stood there, in a dark blue shirt, his gaze falling on her and the photo in her hand. Digging through the past again? He asked, voice low, but not angry. Olivia stood, her eyes defiant but slightly unsteady. What are you doing here? She snapped. Damien stepped closer, gaze lingering on the photo. I wanted to see what you'd find, he said quietly. And maybe I want answers too. She handed him the photo, their hands brushing, an electric flicker that made them both freeze. What did my father teach you? She asked, locking eyes with him. Damien looked at the photo, eyes distant. He taught me that winning doesn't matter as much as doing what's right, he said, voice hoarse. But I forgot that. Until I met you. Olivia's breath caught. Her heart raced. She stepped closer, shoulder grazing his as she pointed to the letter. Who twisted you? She asked, voice shaking. Damien stepped back, a flicker of pain in his eyes. I don't know, he replied, but I'll find out, if you'll let me. The dim light painted shadows across their faces. They stood close, so close Olivia could smell the faint sandalwood on him. She turned away, masking her fluster. You don't trust me, Damien said gently. But you trust him, don't you? Olivia nodded, eyes sad. My father saw something in you I never did, she whispered. Damien gave a faint smile, teasing in his tone. Maybe he knew I could survive your stubbornness. Olivia laughed, soft, surprised. The tension cracked. Don't get cocky, Hawthorne, she said playfully. I haven't forgiven you. Damien tilted his head, eyes deep and certain. I'll wait, Prescott. They left the room, the letter and photograph in Olivia's hand. Back in the car, Damien opened the door, his arm brushing her shoulder. The light touch made Olivia stiffen. Careful, she said, teasing, but her heart was pounding. Damien smiled. I'm always careful, especially with you. Olivia turned to the window, but his gaze lingered in her thoughts. That night she held the photo close, wondering, was Damien the answer to her father's mystery? Or just another, more dangerous question? A small cafe on a Manhattan corner sat quiet, the soft golden light from wall sconces falling on old wooden tables, blending with the rich scent of roasted coffee. Olivia Prescott sat across from Monica Evans, an old friend who had once been a trusted ally in her promising days as a lawyer. Monica's head was bowed, fingers twisting a napkin, her eyes red-rimmed. Olivia, in a deep blue sweater and jeans, sat with arms crossed, her posture proud but touched with sorrow. She had come after receiving Monica's message, a promise to reveal the truth about the lawsuit against Hawthorne Corp 5 years ago, the case that had cost Olivia everything. I never wanted to betray you, Olivia, Monica said, voice trembling, tears spilling. Richard Hawthorne bribed me. He threatened to destroy my family. My father was sick, and I had no choice. I made the wrong one, and I hate myself for it every day. Olivia sat still, the memories flooding back. Her father Edward's disappointed eyes, the media's frenzy, and Damien's cold smile in the courtroom. She had always believed Damien was behind it all. Now Monica's words confirmed it wasn't Damien, it was Richard. Olivia tightened her grip on the coffee cup, her voice low. You know what I lost because of that? Monica looked up, desperate. I know, and I'm sorry. If you need me to testify, I will. I owe you. Olivia stared at her, torn between fury and compassion. Her father had once said forgiveness wasn't forgetting. It was letting go to move forward. She stood, walked around the table, and embraced Monica. The hug was light, but carried the weight of an old wound finally closing. I won't promise to forget, Olivia whispered, but I'll try to understand. Monica clung to her, tears soaking Olivia's shoulder. When Monica left, Olivia remained, her mind spinning. Richard Hawthorne, Damien's older brother, was behind it all. The hatred she had carried for Damien these 5 years had been a lie. She remembered his eyes at the cemetery, full of pain, and the photo of him with her father, so close, like family. She reached for her phone, scrolling to Damien's name, but couldn't bring herself to call. A deep voice spoke behind her. You look like you just uncovered a national secret. Olivia jumped, turned. Damien stood there in a fitted gray suit, his eyes as dark and deep as ever. What are you doing here? She asked, sharp, but her heart fluttered. Damien pulled out a chair, his hand brushing her shoulder as he sat, a casual touch that made her freeze. I was just passing by, he said with a teasing glint. But seeing you like this, I had to stop. Olivia scoffed, masking a smile. Don't flatter yourself, Hawthorne, she replied. I don't need your judgment. Damien tilted his head, his gaze growing serious. What did she tell you? Olivia hesitated, suspicion creeping into her voice. Why do you care? Damien met her eyes, sincere. Because I know you're searching for the truth, and I want to help. She was stunned. Monica's words about Richard echoed in her head. She wanted to tell him, but his eyes, intense and unreadable, made her pause. Monica said Richard bribed her, she said quietly. Not you. Damien's fists clenched, anger flashing, not at her, but at his brother. I suspected it, he said, voice dark. Richard always needed control, even over me. The cafe's warm light fell over their faces. Olivia studied him, torn inside. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, voice shaking. Damien reached out, almost touching her hand, but stopped. "Because you didn't trust me," he said, voice tinged with sadness. "But I hope you'll start to." Olivia laughed softly, easing the tension. "You're such a dreamer, Hawthorne," she teased. Damien smiled. "I'm better at it than you think." They left the cafe, walking side by side. Not too close, not too far. Olivia glanced at Damien, his presence still lingering in her mind. "Thank you," she said quietly. Damien raised an eyebrow, teasing. "Did you just thank me? I should write that down." Olivia laughed, shaking her head, but something warm settled in her chest. That night, as she lay down with Luna curled beside her, she wondered, was Damien finally her ally? Or just another question in the mystery her father had left behind? Damien Hawthorne's penthouse living room was cast in a dim amber glow from the floor lamp, but the air was thick, like a storm on the verge of breaking. Olivia Prescott stood in the center of the room, her fists clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. Her brown eyes blazed with a mix of rage and heartbreak. She wore a deep blue sweater and jeans, her chestnut hair disheveled. Her proud stance couldn't hide the fracture within her soul. Across from her stood Damien, sleeves rolled up on his white shirt, eyes dark and tense. A glass of whiskey shimmered untouched on the table, as if even one motion might break the fragile thread holding him together. After her meeting with Monica, the truth that Richard Hawthorne had orchestrated the lawsuit 5 years ago had shattered Olivia's beliefs. And yet, doubts about Damien still gnawed at her. "What did you know about Richard and the lawsuit?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling with restraint, each word a blade. Damien's brow furrowed, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "What are you talking about, Prescott?" he replied, voice low and guarded. Olivia stepped closer, only a few feet between them, eyes blazing. "Don't pretend," she hissed. "Monica said Richard bribed her to ruin me. He's your brother. You must have known something." Damien's fists clenched, his gaze darkened, like a man cornered. "You think I was complicit?" he shot back, his voice rough with pain. "You've always seen me as the villain, never once gave me a chance to be anything else." His words cut through her like a knife, leaving her breathless. She remembered her father Edward's letter. "Don't be too quick to hate Damien." She remembered Damien's broken expression at the cemetery, the photo of him with her father, so close, like family. But doubt still screamed inside her. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she shouted, voice cracking, tears brimming. "I lost everything because of that case, my reputation, my career, my trust. And you said nothing, even though you knew Richard might have been involved." Damien stepped closer until their faces were inches apart, fury and hurt blazing in his eyes. "What did you want me to say?" he growled. "That I suspected my own brother for years but had no proof? That I'm exhausted from being hated by you for something I didn't do?" In a moment of anger, Olivia swung her arm, accidentally knocking over a cup of coffee on the table. The hot liquid splashed onto Damien's suit. Both froze. Damien looked down at the spreading stain and let out a sigh. "If you wanted to ruin me," he muttered, "you could have picked a cheaper jacket." Olivia let out a broken laugh through her tears, a flash of humor cutting through the darkness. "Sorry," she mumbled, voice shaky. She reached to dab the stain, her hand brushing against his chest. The touch made them both go still. Their eyes met, not with hostility, but with pain, and the desperate need to understand. Damien caught her hand, his grip strong yet gentle. "Prescott," he whispered, voice low and rough, "I don't want to see you hurt." Olivia stared at him, her heartbeat thundering. His warmth spread through her like fire in the cold. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But old wounds clung to her like chains. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, her voice breaking. Damien leaned in, his face barely inches from hers, eyes deep enough to drown her. "Because I've lost everything too," he whispered, his voice raw. As if pulled by something beyond logic, Damien leaned down and kissed her, softly, briefly, but filled with emotion. It wasn't lust. It wasn't a ploy. It was a confession. Olivia froze. Her heart pounded wildly. But she didn't pull away. She simply stood there, lost in the firestorm inside her. Her phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She stepped back, touching her lips, dazed. A new message lit up the screen. Damien knew Richard set you up from the start. He's just playing you. She went pale. Her eyes flared with shock and betrayal. What's wrong? Damien asked, concerned. Olivia handed him the phone, her voice trembling. You knew, didn't you? You knew Richard framed me, and still let me believe in you. Damien read the message, his expression hardening. I didn't know, he said firmly. You'd trust an anonymous text over me? Olivia shook her head, tears now freely falling. The message had struck the final blow, shattering the fragile thread of trust she had just begun to spin. I can't stay here, she whispered, voice breaking. That kiss, so tender, so real, now felt like a bitter lie. She ran to the door, stepping on shards of broken glass without stopping, leaving Damien standing in the ruins of what almost was. He grabbed the whiskey glass and hurled it, watching it shatter across the floor. His eyes burned, not just with suspicion toward Richard, but toward himself. The kiss had been real. So why didn't she believe him? Was he wrong to let her into his heart? Olivia ran through the Manhattan rain, tears blending with water, her heart torn apart. The anonymous message echoed in her head, confirming her deepest fear. She'd trusted the wrong man. She thought of her father's eyes, of Luna brushing against her legs, of Damien's kiss, gentle, searing. Was he acting, or was she running from herself? She stopped under a storefront awning, hugging herself as the wind sliced through her. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to Damien's name, but didn't call. She remembered his teasing words. I'm better at dreaming than you think. A bitter laugh escaped her, tears falling harder. She wanted to believe him, but she was terrified of being wrong again. Back in the penthouse, Damien stared out the window, watching her silhouette vanish into the rain. You really are a storm, he murmured, lips curling slightly, but his eyes glistened with pain. He picked up a shard of glass, thinking of Richard, of the message, of Olivia. The woman who had made him want to believe in something good, and now made him fear the very heart he thought was already numb. That night, both lay awake in separate corners of the city, consumed by one question: what is the truth? And do they have the courage to face it together?